Rommel portrait MIT Order North Africa, 1942. One man had brought the British Empire to its knees. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, had turned the sands of Africa into his personal battlefield. He was feared, admired, and considered unbeatable. But deep in the Egyptian desert, his fate was already being sealed. Cart Trupp Imposition October 19 for Tobai October 1942. Rommel's Afrika Corps held a defensive line near a small railway station called El Alamein. To the north, the Mediterranean Sea. To the south, impassable salt marshes. There was no room to maneuver, no room to retreat. This was where everything would be decided. 88mm flak cannon. Rommel had fortified his position with hundreds of thousands of mines and powerful 88mm guns, the most feared anti-tank weapon of the war. His men called the defensive belt the Devil's Garden. It stretched for miles across the burning desert sand. Soldatenrup in W. Stebbit. Rommel's army was exhausted. Fuel was running out. Supply ships were being sunk in the Mediterranean. His men fought on empty stomachs under a merciless sun. Meanwhile, on the other side of the minefield, a massive British force was gathering, larger than anything Rommel had ever faced. Montgomery, General Bernard Montgomery had taken command of the British 8th Army. Calm, calculated, and coldly determined, Montgomery had one goal: to destroy Rommel completely. He spent weeks building his forces. Over 1,000 tanks, 2,000 guns, 200,000 men. He would not attack until he was ready. Rommel MIT Fernglass. Rommel sensed the storm coming. He inspected his lines daily, studying the horizon through his binoculars. He knew what was coming, and he knew his army was not strong enough to stop it. He wrote to his wife, "I am facing the greatest battle of my life, and I am not sure we can survive it." Roch and W. Steet. 9:40 p.m. on October 23, 1940. To the desert exploded. Over 900 British artillery guns opened fire simultaneously. The ground shook for miles. The sky turned orange. For 5 hours, Rommel's positions were hammered without mercy. Operation Lightfoot had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. British and Commonwealth infantry advanced through the darkness into the minefield on foot. Step by step, death waited with every footfall. Engineers crawled on their hands and knees, clearing mines by hand. Men died silently in the sand, but they kept moving forward. Rommel was in Germany, sick and exhausted, when the attack began. He raced back to Africa. When he arrived and saw the situation, his face turned pale. His reserves were nearly gone. His fuel was critically low. He called Berlin desperately, but Hitler refused to send reinforcements. For 12 brutal days, the battle raged. Rommel threw his tanks forward again and again and again and again. They were destroyed. The 88mm guns that had once protected him now fell silent one by one. The Afrika Corps was bleeding to death in the sand. The Luftwaffe could no longer protect the skies over Africa. British air power was total. Supply convoys were destroyed before they reached the front. Rommel's army was starving, burning, and running out of ammunition. The end was approaching, and everyone knew it. On November 2nd, Montgomery launched the final blow, Operation Supercharge. Fresh armored divisions smashed through what remained of Rommel's lines. German and Italian soldiers, exhausted and outnumbered, fought with desperate courage, but it was hopeless. Hitler sent one final order: stand fast, yield not 1 yard of ground. Rommel obeyed for 2 days. Then, watching his army disintegrate around him, he made the decision that would haunt him forever. He ordered the retreat. He chose his men's lives over Hitler's command. The retreat became a catastrophe. Thousands of German and Italian soldiers were left behind without fuel, without transport. They walked into British captivity across hundreds of miles of desert. The Afrika Corps, once the most feared fighting force in the world, was finished. Montgomery had done what no Allied commander had achieved before. He had defeated Rommel in open battle. Church bells rang across Britain for the first time since the war began. Winston Churchill declared, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat." El Alamein cost both sides dearly. 13,000 Allied soldiers killed or wounded, over 30,000 Axis soldiers captured, hundreds of tanks destroyed on both sides. The desert sand soaked red with the blood of men from a dozen nations, all fighting for a strip of African coastline. Rommel never recovered from El Alamein. He was driven back across Libya, then Tunisia. Within 2 years, accused of involvement in a plot against Hitler, he was forced to take his own life. The Desert Fox, brilliant, fearless, and ultimately tragic, was gone. Alamein was the turning point of the war in North Africa. It proved that Rommel could be beaten. It saved Egypt, the Suez Canal, and Britain's empire in the Middle East. And it began the long road that would end 3 years later in the ruins of Berlin. Standard text. History remembers Erwin Rommel as one of the greatest commanders of the Second World War. But Alamein remembers him differently as the man who came so close, who fought so hard, and who lost everything in the sand. Before Alamein, Rommel stood at the height of his power. Hitler had personally promoted him to Field Marshal, the youngest in the German army. He was celebrated across Germany as a national hero. Nobody could imagine that within weeks, everything would collapse. Inside Rommel's headquarters, his officers knew the truth. The maps told a brutal story: shrinking supplies, growing enemy strength, no reinforcements coming. Some officers begged Rommel to retreat before it was too late. He refused. A field marshal does not retreat without a fight. Hitler had promised Rommel everything: tanks, fuel, aircraft. But the promises never came. The war in Russia swallowed every reserve. Africa was secondary. Rommel was fighting the British Empire with one hand tied behind his back, abandoned by the very regime he served. The ordinary soldiers of the Afrika Corps fought with extraordinary courage. Far from home, under a burning sun, short of water and ammunition, they held their positions for 12 days against overwhelming odds. Many of them never saw Germany again. Montgomery showed no mercy. He fed fresh divisions into the battle, relentlessly grinding Rommel's army down systematically. This was not a battle of genius against genius. This was the crushing weight of allied industrial power, and Rommel had no answer to it. The desert keeps its secrets, but the graves at Alamein tell the story of courage, of sacrifice, and of a battle that changed the world forever. This was Alamein. This was the fall of the Desert Fox.